Come on, sinners and saints. Hope everybody's doing well. Happy Thanksgiving. I thought we would have a little video right before Thanksgiving to kind of get you in the mood to be happy. Got the trigger warning. This is Charles Starkweather. Charles Starkweather, a teenage killer with James Dean looks. He was tough, dangerous guy that had a rebel without a cause attitude that spread terror throughout the community. Anyone that had a gun got a gun out and loaded it. The National Guard wandering all over Lincoln, Nebraska, expecting that he would show up someplace with his 14-year-old girlfriend, Carol Fulgate. 14 years. He's 18, but still she's 14. Um, he went on a murderous road trip through 1950s middle America, leaving a trail of dead men, women, and children in his wake. The murders were the horrendously brutal. A witness said, "It is not just one on one. Okay, I'm shooting you. You're dead." They opened up the storm door cellar, and I was looking down, seeing those kids. I can close my eyes still this day and still see them. But were these young killers the twisted products of their environment, or were they born to kill? Well, it was a small town then. There was still downtown cornfields behind houses. It's a very sleepy town. People waiting for something to happen. A little bit of feeling that you're never going to get out of this town. This was Lincoln in the mid 1950s, and it was basically a well policed area. It's a pretty calm town without much major crime. People left their doors unlocked, not like in the big cities. Even in those days, it was an agriculture, God fearing, and law abiding society that the red haired, bow legged Charles Starkweather was born in 1938, the third of seven boys and one girl. It isn't politically correct term, but one of the witnesses called them poor white trash. Um, they were certainly not pillars of society. Mrs. Starkweather was the mother and was a very nice, hardworking woman that basically supported the family. Her husband worked off and on, but she was the sort of one that kept the family going. I think, and they had a bunch of kids, as far as I know. None of the other kids got in trouble. Working class is probably the best way to put it. Charlie Starkweather would remember his early years as idyllic, playing cowboys with his brothers, fishing with his father, and helping his mom in the kitchen. The family was poor, but they were not deprived. I mean, they ate and they had clothes. There was nothing to indicate that his childhood was anything out of the ordinary until he went to school, which was a huge change for him. When he had his first day of school, he was teased terribly for being so bow legged and was considered to be a slow learner, a dummy. And so school was horrendously traumatic in the context of such a big change for him. Whereas he was a meek kid, not violent. When he was quite little, he began to evolve into a bully who would beat up kids even if they were bigger than him to cut them down to size if they were messing with him. Dennis Carnup, Carnup, now a lawyer, was the son of Lincoln sheriff at the time. He remembers the young Starkweather. Well, he lived right across the street from me. They lived in a building just across the street from the county jail where we lived. The family was pretty rugged, and Charlie Starkweather was a PE assistant. He was real tough, dangerous. He looked dangerous, and you knew you didn't want to mess with him. Anything you say, do, or anything get his attention drawn towards you. And that was all you wanted to do was just get out of class. He said, I wasn't singled out Pretty much everybody else felt the same way. If you were always glad when class was over and you could get out of there. Many young people adopt a persona of being bad as well as establishing some kind of role for themselves and their family and in the community. More widely, Stockweather took that to a very different level. He also showed a characteristic of so many serial murderers and being able to mimic someone that he was not, and that would be James Dean. It was a time when there was the big, this was big for the kids to be James Dean. He was a big influence on the children. And then the movie Rebel Without a Cause come out. I think there was a lot of anger that was repressed anger in kids, not just feeling that they had nowhere to go and they were wanting to get out of town. And on leaving school, Starkweather got a job as a garbage man. And that's when he met his 13-year-old girlfriend, Carol Ann Fulgate. Bob Hall attended Fulgate School. Well, everybody knew who she was. She was a grade ahead of him, and she was a very typical junior high girl, like boys. I don't think she liked school a whole lot. Um, Said that there was an art teacher that disciplined her. She told her, she said, I'm going to kill you. Um, I'm going to kill you. But then I think is that wasn't uncommon, that a lot of children had animosity towards teachers, parents, and their siblings. And they go to say that they think that uh, most people thought that, but you don't act on it. A lot of underlining tension right around then. Here, let's get this going. Okay, this is Carol Ann, and this lady seems to be with her after everything goes on, and she always has a death grip on her arm. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, comment, complain, rebuttal. To Carol Ann, to be disappointed of Fulgate's family, Carol Ann and Charlie became inseparable. He was the first girl that ever paid any attention to him in a serious way because I guess she was 13 when they met. He was 18. And that, like a lot of young girls, I guess, even today, she was impressed by the older guy paying her attention. And he was tickled that this young girl that was pretty was paying him attention. Um, Supposedly, he had taken the bad boy persona. How many women do we know that like the bad boy persona, living on the edge? That's exciting. Um, that's what one of the therapist ladies said. If you're living in flatlands of nothing around you and somebody comes to you and says, let me show you the world in a way that you could never dream, of course you don't have your own solid identity, you're going to go and say, why not? But the few thrills of the 1950s Lincoln provided were not enough for Starkweather. His ambitions with his family were very poor, but when he took a job as trash collector and he was exposed to a new neighborhood outside of the one that he grew up in the middle class and upper class, as he saw the millionaires and all the things he could never attain, he decided to become an outlaw. In late November 1957, Starkweather visited Crest Service Station near Fieldgate's home, hoping to buy her a Christmas gift. The young attendant, Robert Colbert, was new. Charlie wanted to buy a little toy for her for Christmas, and he had no money. So he asked the guy, could he get it on time? And the guy told him no, and this infuriated Charlie. In a few hours of December 1st, 1957, Starkweather began casing the gas station after visiting the store twice on the pretext of buying cigarettes and gum. He pulled up on the highway, his face covered with a bandana, and he went and held up the lone attendant with the shotgun. It was Robert Colbert, 21 years old, a young pregnant wife at home waiting on him. He wanted to get all the proceeds, that there were in the store and the safe. He couldn't get the safe open, so he got $100, and he took Colbert with him. The $100 is all that was in the till. Starkweather forced Colbert into the driver's seat of the car. He took the service station attendant, Colbert, out to a rural road, shot him in the head with the shotgun, killing him, just blew him away. Many people commit murder as a one off, as a byproduct of being angry or seeking revenge, or because the force of a particular circumstances at a particular point in their life. But crucially, the vast majority of murderers stop after committing the first murder. But the small number of people whom Charles Starkweather was one, rather than being overwhelmed by the experience, they found it exciting. They found it sexy. They found it gave them power and control over another person, and power and control that they had felt like they had been denied before in other aspects of their lives. Charlie Starkweather had taken his first life. It would not be his last. December 1957, Charles Starkweather robbed the Crest Service Station, Lincoln, Nebraska, taking the attendant. He took him out to the desert, executed him, shot him in the head. Starkweather disposed of the murder weapon in a river and altered the appearance of his car to avoid detection. While police searched family for the mystery killer, reporter Dale Harding was following the case closely and early in the case. Um, and it was they never suspected or interviewed Starkweather. There was a bunch of people that were given lie detector tests and a bunch of others that were interviewed, but for some reason he slipped under the radar. And I don't know why. I mean, but he did for almost 2 months. Excuse me. Starkweather stayed out of trouble, enjoying his $100 for a whole month with his now 14-year-old girlfriend, Carol Forgate. But then he's got, but then he struck again, and this time it would make the gas station robbery look like child's play. Witness said, I was a sophomore in high school when my mother picked me up after basketball practice, excuse me, and said that there had been 3 murders, and pretty sure Charlie Starkweather was the killer. Um, January 21st, 1958, Starkweather had entered Carol Fulgate's home where they lived with his mother, um, Vilda Bartlett, and stepfather, Marion Bartlett, and her half sister, Betty Jean. After an argument broke out, and there's also pictures of this too, Um, she said, damn it, she said that the dad started a fight with Charles Starkweather and all this. That's the car. This bullet hole right there's where the thing goes in. I'll show you that later. But this is a picture of them together. Maybe, maybe I'll show you. There's a picture of them together. This was the gas attendant guy. And they go into the home of Carol Ann, or his girlfriend's house. Said that the dad started a fight and that he shot him. Um, and that let me just read this. Babysitter was screaming, and that's when they killed them. Gates' mother, Velda, was shot in the face, and her half sister, Betty Jean, had a knife thrown into her throat and was beaten with the butt of a rifle. Her stepfather, Marion, was shot in the head and stabbed repeatedly in the throat. I think it got into an argument over Carol and Mr. Bartlett, and I think this just escalated from there. And don't think it's premeditated idea. If I'm going to wipe him out, Bartlett's body was wrapped in bedding. They shot and killed the mother and the father, and the little girl was two. And they said that he said he threw a knife and he thought he hit the little girl in the chest, but it hit her in the throat, and he hit her with the butt of the gun. They took the bodies and put the dad out into the chicken coop, put the mother down into the outhouse toilet, and then put the little girl in a box and set her on top of the mother. For 6 days, Starkweather and Fulgate lived in the house as man and wife, with the bodies of the Fulgate family laying just yards away. They put up a sign that said that they had the flu. I don't know if this is it or not. I apologize. Now that's the Bartlett thing. But put up a sign that said they had the flu to come back later, and that the whole family had it back then. People would not visit if you had the flu. Well, finally, the grandma gets suspicious and she's like, okay, you people let me in or I'm calling the law. So she went to call the law. So they took off and the law came there and they found the bodies. Um, and the bodies were, they had just put them in like the chicken coop, like it was meaningless. They had no emotion, meaning. So living with the bodies so close to them, the horrific thought, but to the serial killers, it's just another piece of thing. Carol later claimed she wasn't at the house whenever the murders had occurred, and Starkweather had told her that her family was held hostage elsewhere. Starkweather, Starkweather claimed Carol had played an active role, particularly in beating of her half sister. But the number of serial killers we see, killers operating within what's known as the by psychologists as the folly of fear, literally a madness shared by two. What it does is, and most immediately, is it creates a loyalty between two protagonists, whereas they normalize their behavior to each other. Their worldview becomes one which is permissible and acceptable, and everyone else in the world becomes something that they should be destroyed. At the Bartlett house, they had visitors come, they turned them away with the excuse of being ill. Um, Once they got the bodies, that's whenever they called the school and had everybody leave. After 6 days of being turned away, the family and friends increasingly become suspicious. The grandma is the one that, like I said, got the law there. And then this is a younger picture of him, but we'll get to him. The bodies were discovered on Monday evening, and Bartlett's murders made them the 10 o'clock news. That night, three murders were a pretty big deal in Lincoln, Nebraska at the time. Her mother and her 3-year-old half sister. She actually had another half sister that wasn't there at the time. He said, or she would have died too. The people of Lincoln were stunned, but no one thought the triple murder was anything more than a one off on a journey of discovery. The journey is not just a journey in space and time, but it's also a journey to discover the kinds of persons who want to be and what they want to do. On the 27th of January 1958, Starkweather and Fulgate arrived at the farm of 70-year-old bachelor August Meyer. This is a younger picture of him. I got an older picture, but apparently they're not in order. I thought they were. A, a place where Starkweather knew well. Ian, his dad, had hunted with Mr. Meyer for several years, and they have become friendly and everything. Approaching the property, they start with the car, and it got stuck in a muddy lane. Let me see if I can find that picture. This is a picture of him old, or that might have been Mr. Ward. Anyway, they got their car stuck in the mud. Um, so they get out and they went into a little school cellar. I don't know what was doing there, but it was so cold that they had to walk on up to the door. And whenever they got up there, he opened up the door because he knew him and everything. And he pulls out the shotgun, he shoots him, and just killed Maya, was shot in the back of the head at almost point blank range, dragged the body out into the shed behind the house, and then he and Carol went into the house. Starkweather searched the farmhouse for money, clothes, weapons, and Carol ate cookies and jello and said they had to go, while August Meyer's dead body lay in the nearby wash house. Once they created this parallel world in which they socialized with each other to simply think of the kinds of behavior that was engaging and being normal. Once they inhabit that world, it's much more easy for them to continue to behave according to the norms of the world in which they have created and revolve around. Charles Starkweather and Carol Fulgate, and it's much more easy for them after they have murdered twice, 3 times, to continue to murder until they are stopped in darkness. Fell Starkweather and Fulgate began to get restless. The night that they decided to leave, Charlie's car was stuck in the mud in the lane leading up to the farmhouse. And so they took off on foot, walking the country road. And teenagers Bennett Bobby Jensen, and this was his girlfriend or girlfriend, who was 17, and Carol King, his girlfriend, who 16, being good Samaritan, stops and offers to give them a ride. What was to happen next would shake the community to the core. Nebraska, January 1958. Teenage killer Starkweather. Body count rises to 5 as the gas station attendant, the mother, stepfather, the half sister, 14-year-old girlfriend Carol Forgate, and now 70-year-old um, half sister of his 14-year-old girlfriend Carol Forgate, and now 70-year-old farmer August Meyer. After dumping Maya's body into the wash house, Starkweather and Forgate began to leave the area on foot. That's whenever they got the ride from Robert and Carol. At gunpoint, they took the teens, they forced them into the storm cellar. They shot him. They shot him 6 times in the head. I do have a picture of it, but I won't post it because you know how some some social media things are. Anyway, um, and she was stabbed in her genital area very bad. Starkweather says that that was Carol that did that, and she denies anything. Um, where the schoolhouse had stood, there was a little area, and they put them down in there. The next day, August, excuse me, August Meyer's body was found at the farmhouse. Reporter Dale Harding was at the crime scene. With Robert Jensen and Carol King's fate was discovered. I was looking down, seeing those kids in that storm cellar, and it was just very horrible scene. I closed my eyes and I could still see it today. Robert Jensen had been shot 6 times in the head. Carol King was partially nude. She too had been shot in the head, and her sexual organs had been stabbed. It was awful. I mean, it was bad seeing August Meyer work. You know, he worked in the city and had been shot, and there was blood all over him. They would clean up the blood and then live in the house like that 6 days in their parents' or her parents' house. It's the worst thing I'd ever seen. Those teenagers that were killed were 16. They were stabbed and mutilated. There was no sign of sexual assault. It was pretty gruesome, to say the least. She is not an unwilling partner, states one of the witnesses. She's not, talking about Carol, what we would call Stockholm syndrome, where when you're captured and you have to take the identity of the capture in order to survive. I don't think she had Stockholm syndrome. I think that she was a willing participant. In order to survive, they develop some type of unusual bond where essential whatever he tells her to do, she will participate in the crimes. Using Jensen's car, Starkweather and Fulgate set off west with the plan to escape to Washington. Stark state where Starkweather had a brother, but after 3 hours on the road, they changed their mind, turned around, and headed back to Lincoln. What happened next would send shockwaves to the city and the state and ultimately the whole country. It just keeps getting worse and worse, doesn't it? It's just crazy. And this is where they call the students out of class to remember the sleepy kind of sleepy town and the sea of cars outside the playground where there was traffic jams of parents picking up kids, had no idea what happened. They thought that Russia had invaded and that it's going to be World War III had started. And in the way for the Lincoln, maybe it had around 8:30 on, maybe it had Around 8:30 a.m. on 28th of January 1958, Starkweather and Fulgate had entered a mansion in a wealthy country club district. Let me get that picture. I think I already passed it. I apologize with the pictures. I don't know what happened, but these were in order. There's a picture of her car stuff. That's an actual picture too. This is the home. This is the Ward's home. Starkweather and Fulgate entered a mansion in the wealthy country club district of Lincoln. I apologize about the pictures and the weight. Sorry about that. They held the occupants, Clara Ward and her deaf maid, Lillian Finkel, captive at gunpoint around 6 p.m. Clara Ward's husband, then 47, the industrialist C.L. C. Laura Ward, returned home from work. The next morning, when he failed to turn up at the office, suspicions were raised. Lower Ward's body was discovered just inside the front door. He had been shot in the back of the head through the temple. Clara Ward was in the bedroom on the floor, dead from multiple stab wounds to the neck, chest, and back. And Finkel, there's a movie with it's based on this. Lillian Finkel was I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at this at all. I'm thinking of Einhorn Finkel was dead and tied to a bed and stabbed and repeatedly in the chest, stomach, and severe cuts to her arms and legs. As most serial murders, it is just one of those things that's it can be cutting it and stabbing and it's just a tremendous horror scene. And so they took a bunch of jewelry and they took off from there. And then the word got out. And then they went and they were driving at this time too. First, I'll tell you this: they got like a posse together. They got the National Guard. They got all this. Um, they got all these like little groups and stuff together. Um, they were aiming to hide out in Washington State, and the reign of terror was far from over. Late January 1957, 10 men, 10 women had been killed, and children. And 19-year-old James Dean wannabe Charles Starkweather and his 14-year-old girlfriend Carol Fulgate had eluded capture and were heading west in search of freedom. It was all part of the plan to live happily ever after as arch criminals who were able to escape justice. It seems so absurd to imagine 19-year-old and a 14-year-old living happily ever after, but the adolescent minds is not fully developed, so their frontal lobes is not giving them what they need to make proper judgment. That's my words. And I'm trying to find the last person here. They come up on this one gentleman that's a shoe salesman, and he was just on the side of the road sleeping in Wyoming. And he was 37-year-old traveling salesman. Merle Collision was shot 9 times as he sat in his car. And then to get the emergency brake off, he couldn't get it off. So somebody stopped to help him, which was a big old boy. And so Charles Starkweather pulls a gun on him and tells him that he's going to kill him if he doesn't get the emergency brake off. This guy wrestles with him and takes the gun. So Starkweather, about that time, a cop's pulling up, and Carol runs back to the cop car screaming, "He's going to kill me! He's got a gun!" So Charles Starkweather takes off, and that's where you've seen it the first. The car with the bullet holes in it. They shot through there and a piece of glass hit his ear and he thought he was shot in the head, so he stopped and they arrested him. And on June 5th, 1959 at 12:01, they executed Charles Starkweather. And after 21 years, I think it was, Carol was released and became a nurse for 20 years. And lived until she died. But that's the story of Charles Starkweather and Carol Fulgate. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll go through some pictures real quick. This was the parent of Carol Fulgate. That's the sister. That's the bodies. That's the body of the wards. There's old Charles Starkweather. This is where he got hit with a piece of glass on his ear and he thought he was shot. This is Carol. No, that's Starkweather. See the death grip she has on her? Every picture she has a grip on her. And they said she showed no emotion ever on her face. That the only time she showed emotion is whenever she was sentenced and she cried. She still says she was innocent. Um, they're both dead, obviously. But I hope you enjoyed this. I know it was a little bit with the pictures and stuff, but I appreciate your time. And let me see. Well, I guess it's going to let me show you. But I was going to show you all the paperwork that I have, and I've watched hours and hours on this. So I hope you enjoyed it again, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you for joining me. And we got 2 more coming up. Crazy Nurse. We'll talk to you later. Bye. Bye. She doesn't move her head. I don't know why.